www.schroeppelhistorical.com. And they reside there for one television program they want to watch it. So, couple announcements. Reminder, our September program is Tuesday night, the 16th. Our historian, Barbara Dix, is going to do a program on the Phoenix Fire, and we're supposed to have lots of photos to view of maybe pre-fire, during the fire, and after. So that should be interesting if you're, especially if you live or you're from this village. Reminder, there will be an annual craft show, bake sale, silent auction. It's Saturday, September 22nd. And we're still looking for one more additional crafter. So if anybody is a crafter, or you know somebody that would be willing, that would like to come here, contact me, please. I want to remind everyone that we still have the 1902 Phoenix Strip books that we reproduced. So we have hardcover copies. They're $25 each. So if you're interested, see one of us working here tonight. There are membership forms on the chairs. If you're not a member and you would like to join, we welcome you. And back there, I think on that top of that shelf is cabinet over there. There's some miscellaneous items for sale. So, with that, that was pretty quick tonight. I want to welcome Elaine Peters. She's the historian from Jordan, and she's going to do the program Beneath Our Feet. And she knows everything about archaeology.
Close.
All right. So thank you.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I just want to say that back last September, I went to a conference, and it was upstaters against downstaters in the pronunciation of all their names of different localities. And downstaters were given this name that started with S, followed with a C-H-R-O-E, and they're like, everybody's looking at it like, I have no idea. And I'm thinking, okay, everybody, the upstaters have got to know. And they're all staring, I'm like, Schroeppel. They're like, that's pronounced Schroeppel? It's like, how did you know that? I'm like, well, don't live that far away, but yeah, it stumped them. But thank you for having me here tonight. I am so excited about archaeology. Archaeology for me, when I was a kid, my first dabbles into it was learning about, of course, Egypt and all the pharaohs and all the things that they found. And then I learned that they were finding things out about the Maya, and that was really exciting too. I've always loved history, which is one of the reasons I became a historian, was there's so much about history to learn about. But one of the things I learned about very quickly was that there is stories just right at the home. You don't need to go overseas to get really good stories. You can find them right here. And one of the things that archaeology lends us to is the stories beneath our feet. So that is the story, the title of the talk tonight, Beneath Our Feet. So let's get started about it. What does archaeology tell us? Archaeology tells us a snapshot of the past. It doesn't give us all the clues, it doesn't give us all the information, but it helps us piece together the puzzle for it. If you looked at this old potter shop and it fell into ruin, what might you find? You might find remains of glass, wood, pottery, clay, coal, charcoal. You could find out maybe things that the person had dropped, coins that you could date it from. But you wouldn't necessarily know everything about the potter from all that. That takes a little bit more delve, but it gives us a snapshot into the past. What would it be like if you were to step back in time and see things? So what is archaeology? We're going to go through a couple of basic things first, because what often people think of as archaeology, it is not archaeology. First, it's not geology. The rock is so displeased that you missed that out. My grumpy rock. It's not geology. Well, people use stone for buildings, for tools, for centuries and millennia. It's not geology itself. We're not looking necessarily for rocks. We're looking for what the rocks did. It's also not paleontology. We're not looking for dinosaurs. I actually had somebody who could not understand that the kids could just dig and see what they could find, so they went out and bought plastic dinosaurs for the children to find. And put it in the dirt. And I'm like, oh, they don't need that, because the excitement is finding what's there. And maybe perhaps what's not. Because what often in archaeology happens is it's not so much what is there, but what's missing. If you expect to have something on the site and you never find it, that's information you didn't know before. So it's not paleontology. We're not looking for dinosaurs. We're not looking for fossils. We're not looking for any of that type of stuff. Could you find it on the site? Absolutely, because there, especially out in the desert Southwest, there were places where they built near dinosaur fossils. But that's not what we're looking for. We're also not looking in the rocks and looking for the fossils that we see so prolific around here, shell fossils. Again, that's not what we're looking for. It's not paleontology. Archaeology is the study of ancient and recent human past through material remains. So, to give you an idea on this, if you were to step foot in a museum, and a couple of these actually are museum pieces, you might find bones. Now, this is at Fort Ticonderoga. What did the people eat? The bones left over can help us understand what people ate. The pottery they left, this is also Fort Ticonderoga, the pottery they left behind tells us what cultures they came in contact with, where they were getting their pottery. Was it from Spain? Was it pottery from England? Was it local pottery? Because for a while in the colonies, theoretically, you couldn't make your own pottery in the colonies. You had to import it from England. In fact, there actually is letters that go back and forth between England and a potter in Virginia, and going back and forth between the two, they hear that there's a pottery that's making plates. And the governor has to reassure him, oh no, they're terrible quality plates. The best plates come out of England. Nobody's buying this. This is the junk stuff. Reality, it wasn't. But theoretically, it helps us date things through colonial times on. And the other thing, in more recent past, we dug on one side of a farm, and we dug on the side of an old farm and the business district in the village, and also at the Jordan Academy, and we pulled up tons of bottle caps. And let me just say, Jordan is a Pepsi town. We found a total of 4 bottle caps that were Coke, and everything else was Pepsi. But it helps us understand the people that came before us. So there's a couple different types of archaeology, and I'll be talking a little bit about both that we've done. First is traditional archaeology that we tend to think of. We tend to think of archaeology, we tend to think of pit digs. We take a trench and we dig it down, and we try to see what's in there and carefully sift through the layers of archaeology to find things. So this is actually an archaeological site that is outside the village of Whitesboro. And this site is a site that is a Paleo-Indian site, basically dating from around 8 to 11,000 BC. It's very early, right after the last ice age. We've theorized from all the tools that we find that they were people who were going through and hunting, whether it was elk or other things. The only thing we have remaining from them is the tools that they made. We don't have anything else. We have, because over 10,000 years, all of that stuff is gone. But the stone tools, the tools that they made out of the flint and chert are what we have left over. So as you carefully excavate down the layers here, you are actually somebody with a clipboard who will be recording every single layer, where different artifacts were found, where different pieces of flake of chert were found, because that's what we're looking for. Over to the side here is what we have left over from the glaciers. We find a lot of rocks when we're digging in this area, because it's just the glacial outwash from the last glaciers. We use different kinds of tools to figure out to do digs like this. So we have right here, we have trowels that are carefully going down through the layers, because we have brushes to sweep off layers. And then we also have water. Sometimes water is a helpful tool. When you look at soil, it can look all the same, but when you spray it down with water and get it just a little bit misty wet, different colors will pop up. And if the color change is what you're looking for. When you see the color change, you can know that there was a post hole there, that somebody dug something else out, and later that was filled in with different dirt. You can see the changes in the dirt using the water. Again, this is another thing. You also have measuring tools here at the dig site. The other thing that the girls, so my girls and I, we went with this is in conjunction with the New York State Museum, and they're digging on the site. John Lathrop is is the lead archaeologist on the site. It's actually the site of a farm. And the owners of the farm have been very gracious to let us use the farm for the dig. And right now there is like very beginning talks about possibly making it into a historic area, fully protected, which would be absolutely awesome, because to have the site lost would be terrible. But they start off, they get buckets of dirt that come out, and then they just start sifting, because they're looking for chert or flint. The flint that they're looking for is a very specific flint. The flint that tends to be around the area is like a gray flint. It's very much like when you see like arrowheads that you can collect, or projectile points you collect around here. They come out of this gray chert. However, what they're looking for is stuff that's almost black in color. It's a very dark chert. It actually came from the Cooperstown area, and this particular group of people called the Crowfield people, they actually preferred that chert. So they actually brought it in from the Cooperstown area and hunted with it along the banks of the historic Lake Iroquois, and they left behind the tools that they had flint napped. So they're sifting through trying to find itty bitty bits. My daughter, who's sitting here, was absolutely thrilled and beyond words on this, because she found one of the most exciting things in that dig that whole time, and that was an end scraper. So that is a piece of flint about that big, and it actually would have been lashed onto a stick, and you could use it to scrape hides. It's an end scraper, and they found 2 or 3 of them on that dig over the course of 2 weeks, and Gwen found 2 of them just by chance at the dig. So here she is. All the archaeologists had to stop what they were doing and came running over to look at it, because it was a really big piece of flint. The other cool thing about this site is they've actually found a tool, and I'm not certain what, because John hasn't said, that he's never found in North America before on the site. And this is one of the first ones to record it. But normally we're looking for pieces of flint that go from that size to itty bitty tiny pieces of flint. So when you're flint napping, you get a piece of flint that's kind of like this, and you get a rock out, and you're going to start hammering away trying to flake off the bits. As you're flaking it off, you'll get those itty bitty tiny bits off. When you find a whole scattering of them, we know that they've been flint napping in the area. And we find them all the time there. But you also will find we found a couple of projectile points. So what are some tools that we use? Well, the tools that we tend to use are, we use regular hand trowels. We use pointed trowels to help carefully cut dirt away from things. We measuring tools. And with the stuff that I use for the kids, to help them pinpoint on a graph where I use golf tees. We don't use that with the state stuff, but I use it with the kids. And even little toothbrushes to get away the dirt off the object so that they can see the object for themselves. Another tool that we use is LiDAR. LiDAR is an amazing tool because before all we had were aerial photos to find things. But when LiDAR came out, which is light ranging and detection and ranging, it takes lasers and it shoots the lasers down to Earth and then it records that image down. And even on a place that has heavy foliage like forested areas, you can actually find things that we wouldn't normally be able to see. So, if you notice right here, this is actually really hard to see in real life. First time I saw it, I walked out and I saw it, I'm like, was a fort here? I couldn't see it in the landscape. And I didn't know maybe what to look for at the time, but it wasn't very impressive. But this here is Fort Bull. Fort Stanwix would be over in Rome over here. This is Fort Bull, and this is the old Erie Canal Village in Rome. With LiDAR, you can see where the track was for the old train right here. And right here is Fort Bull from the French and Indian War time period. The other thing we use is like regular maps. They're a wealth of information. It lets us know who lived where. So we know that Herod Otis lived in the house at this time. This was, Isaac Otis also lived here, but this is Herod's son. We also can tell all the different people who lived here, the different shops that were along the street, a lumber and coal yard, the canal, what the canal wall looked like through the village of Jordan. You can find all sorts of information looking on maps. So let's talk a little bit about our digs. We actually had about a total of 5 digs last year. And the first one that I'm going to talk about tonight is the Hotel Cooper Shop dig. So in the village of Jordan, this is Main Street. The Canal Park is right here today. The Masonic Lodge is here today. And behind that, we dug on the site over here. So to give you a little bit of history of this place, the original Erie Canal, the 1825 ditch, went right along actually right here. And this building was built when the 1825 canal ditch was still in use, but going to be switching over to the 1840s ditch, which is the one that you see right here, the big one. If you walk in the village of Jordan today and you see the canal, you're seeing the 1840s ditch. Originally it started life as a cooper shop. Coopers made barrels. Coopers went in and they could make good money by making barrels. Barrels were the cardboard boxes of their day. Everything was shipped in barrels. There were 2 kinds of barrels that were made, basically. One that was watertight and one that didn't need to be. So the ones that didn't need to be stored things like grain and dry goods, and ones that needed to be pearl kegs, those were made to be watertight, and those were ones that would hold things like beer and whiskey and other liquid things, and in our town, malt. They were shipped. A cooper can make a good business, and not only could he make all the barrels that were needed for town, he could also make barrels and ship them to Syracuse. So a lot of the barrels that were made in Jordan were shipped to Syracuse originally for the salt industry, and those would have been the regular kegs that didn't need to be watertight. And then eventually, coopers could also make a buck, and they could send in their watertight ones, and those were sold to the breweries as well. Syracuse produced so much salt, there was just not per day, that there was not enough barrel makers in the city to make enough to carry for all the salt that they made. So all the outlying areas, if you were a cooper and you could get your barrels to market, you could make a good extra profit on that. And they made good on that because their cooper shop was right by the canal. So all they do is roll the barrels out, put them on a barge, and send them off to Syracuse. 1 lock later, they're in Syracuse, buy the salt industry, and load it off, and then an instant profit for them here in just outside of town. So this is the site of the cooper shop. And one of the things that we did here was we also showed the kids pictures of where we were digging. So this was originally the Union Hotel. The Union Hotel, and on the back side of this here was the Grange. And behind that building, there was this building, and then here we go. Here's a little cooper shop right here. There's also a range of stables that were built here. By the time of this picture, there was just out back, if you can see, there's a little bit of a roof. That's the range of stables right there. So this building was built, and the Mason's Lodge caught fire, and there's a brand new cinder block building there today. But that little tiny building eventually fell into complete dereliction. If you can see this picture right here, and you come sit later and see it. By the time of the 1930s, the building had completely fallen apart. The village was left with a nasty-looking ditch through the middle when the canal stopped going through in 1917. And for almost 15 years, the village forefathers were trying to figure out what to do with this ditch. And they got a grant from Onondaga County, when helping put men back to work in the Great Depression. They built our canal park. And in doing so, there was this nasty-looking building just overlooking it. And that was one of the things that got taken down. So here's a better picture of it here. You can see that it was a mess. The Sanborn map makers were like derelict, falling apart, old, ruins. I think they ran out of words in their thesaurus to describe the buildings. And they eventually came down. So here we are, the kids. We're starting to dig on the site of the cooper shop dig, and we didn't know exactly what we were going to find. So I went out onto the site, and it's easy to see from the parch marks, which was where dried grass forms in the summertime, the parch marks, where things were. And I thought, this looks like an interesting place, so let's just put our square meter pit in here and let's see what we find. So we started off, and as we started off, we realized very quickly that, you can look at the picture later, that it actually formed an entire circle there. We uncovered the cistern to the hotel. And the kids found all sorts of things in their dig. Little by little, I told them to save everything. I even do this with my adults that I work with, save everything. If you think it's just a rock and you think it looks interesting, toss it in there. If it's just a rock, we'll get rid of it. But it's better to be safe than sorry on it. And we found all sorts of bits of glass and pottery, which I got a whole bunch of it right here that the kids found from the dig. But among the things that they found, when we were still trying to figure out what it was, were these things. And we found 4 of them. And what we determined later with these were they attached the lid onto the cistern. Those are the 4 latches that held the cistern lid down. And here's a good picture of it. That we dug out here. We actually started our original dig right here, and we noticed there were 2 bricks side by side. So we expanded this way. We realized that the circle went this way, so then we expanded over here. And then we're like, let's try and see where it goes over here. So we expanded over here. And with the help of the kids, we found that this is the cistern. We know this is an early cistern in Jordan because it is round in shape, it's circular in shape. After about 1850 to 60, a lot of the cisterns go to be actually like rectangular holding tanks. They're not circular anymore. And this is one of about 3 in town that I know of now of the cisterns. So what did the kids find? They found remnants of our past. And when you look at some of the stuff, you think, well, that doesn't look very interesting. I find shells all the time. And one of the things I explain to kids when I'm doing things like with shells is if you find a shell in your yard, actually that tells a story. Like if you think about it, there's no sea nearby, so it didn't like accidentally come from the sea, but it does tell a story. And it's a culinary history story. Children pick these up and they're like, well, where did they come from? So I tell them. So getting clams from the coast to Jordan or anywhere inland was kind of a dicey proposition. You couldn't guarantee they're going to be fresh by the time they got here. Even in refrigerated boxcars, it's kind of like, you don't want to die of botulism or other poisonings. So when women were actually quite smart, and our ancestors definitely were not stupid, they would actually buy shells, empty shells, buy canned clams, make the dish, put in the clam, serve it to your guests. When you're done with it, you take it back, you'd wash the shells, put them back in your basket, put them away until the next time you served clams. When they broke, you just tossed them outside because you didn't need them anymore. And so one of the things about clams tells us a little bit about our past, just finding something like that. So we found out that not only did they eat clams, they also ate oysters. So from the hotel. We've got bits of pottery. This is hydraulic cement from the wall of the holding tank, the water tank. Bits of roadside. This is really interesting. These are bits of bone. So we also know that when we find bone, one of the things I look for is it cut bone? Was there a butcher in town by this point? Because not every farmer can easily make nice cuts, but butchers can. And yes, by the time that this was operating as a hotel, these are all butchered pieces of bone that came from the local meat factory. Fun story about the meat factory in Jordan is we are a farming community. We've been a farming community, and we actually had a meat house, slaughterhouse. Except it was upstream of the village, which was really, really gross. And eventually New York State had to tell them they could no longer operate upstream of the village. So they obeyed, they moved. This time they moved to the canal. Yeah, you did not want to swim in the canal in yesteryear. And then we also found things like, so here's more of the pictures of the bricks on there. These are some of the things that the kids found. So we have here different kinds of glassware. The green glass that is right here, this is really old bottle glass from around the 1830s. It was actually hand-blown glass. It's right here would have been where it would have come off of the blowing pipe. And we also found ones that are more machine-made glass, and then here, pressed glass. We found different colors of glass. We found this little shard of red glass. We have no idea where that came from. We found bits of pottery, plateware, crockery, inside and outside of the crockery. And one of the things I like about crockery, looking for that, is it tells a story of itself. So, when you get a piece of crockery like this tells a story of several different locations. The white clay that we tend to think of for salt glazed crockery, the white comes from Long Island clay. Cobalt is usually used because it's one of the few things that actually survives firing. The inside of the pots are often glazed in this for a clean, easy clean surface with Albany slip. Albany slip comes from Albany. This is salt glaze, so the salt probably came from Syracuse on this. So we have Long Island, Albany, Syracuse, and then it was fired here in Jordan and made into pottery. Here's some of the metally bits that they found. They found some glass buttons, some marbles. So after the potter got done making things, he would then go on with the little scraps. He could make pipes. And then after he got done making things with pipes, he would then later go on with the last bits of clay and make marbles for the children. So we often find clay marbles throughout our village. So here's some more stuff here, my little mascot. We found some metal bits. So we found a key to something. This is actually a latch, a thumb latch for a door, as well as little bits of and a latch for a buckle. Now the other thing I like doing is metal detecting. Metal detecting gives people either in the historical community either intriguing interest or absolute disdain. There's very rarely a middle ground for it. Often metal detectors are viewed as people who want to just come in, take treasure, and destroy property. I don't think that's it. I think it can't be any further from the truth from the metal detectorists that I work with. They are very passionate about history. In fact, most of the metal detectorists I work with, they love history so much that they have all their little bits organized, like little mini museums, and they can bring it out. You want to see bits about this type of glass? They've got it. You want to find bits about this type of metal? They've got it. They have everything organized. Coins, they know all the dating information on it cold. They really care about history. Have in the past have people gone into sensitive sites and destroyed them? Absolutely. But then there still have certain archaeologists have gone in and completely destroyed sites, not knowing what they had or what they were doing, especially in the big digs in the 1800s and early 1900s before it became very formalized and doing things in a correct manner. But what a metal detector is looking for the bits of metal that have been left behind. Now, if you notice, not everything on here is metal. I tell the guys that in the digs that we do, that when you dig, pull up everything. Whatever you see. If it's trash, we'll throw it away. If you're not sure if it's trash, put it in our bin full of stuff. I'll go through it later. If it's something special, we'll put it in a bag for you. We'll look at it and see what you found, because there's just so much out there. So we have four different sites for the adult digs this past last summer. First one was in the industrial district in Elbridge. Then it was the quarry farm, the neighborhood dig, and then the Crossman Tavern. So here we go. Our first one is down here in Elbridge, then Village of Jordan, just outside the Village of Jordan, and then along Route 5, still within the town of Elbridge. The first one was the site of the industrial district. The industrial district, the reason Elbridge was founded was a man named Josiah Buck who worked for New York State in the late 1700s. And he was given the task to go out and plot out the military tracts that would be later lotteried off to the military tract. You would be assigned, instead of being paid in cash, you would be paid in land for serving in the Revolution. Josiah Buck went through, and when he came to Skinny Atlas Creek, he found the place in the plot that he wanted, and he set it aside for himself. He knew the water power of Skinny Atlas Creek would be a great drive for the area. And he eventually convinced his friend Colonel Stevens to join him here, and they had, within a short period of time, they had up and working. Josiah Buck built his log cabin, and then he built a sawmill. Because once you build a sawmill, you can build anything. And then usually you build a grist mill after that. But here we have different things that were built. And in this little tiny patch of land, at any given time, there was a pail factory, there was a furniture factory, there was a powerhouse, there was a piano factory, there was all these different factories going on all along Skinny Atlas Creek in the village of Elbridge. And one of the biggest ones was Amphion, the Amphion Company, which was a player piano company. The Doman brothers founded Amphion Piano in Elbridge. Doman also was a whiz at electricity as well. And so he had developed a type of battery that was sold, I believe, to Ford, but he had patents everywhere. And one of his biggest patents was player pianos. And among the things that we found when we dug on the site was we were hoping we'd find just something that had to do with it. So we did find on the site a plaque that for Gould's Pump. That was kind of fun to find. We found this metal thing. I wasn't quite certain what it was, a plaque, but we actually did find some stuff. So here's another picture of the looking down from the hill in the industrial district down right in here and right in here. There's the Amphion Company. And these were all mills going all the way down the street and going this way using the power of Skinny Atlas Creek. So we sent the kids off to look, kids and adults off to look. So we got a couple of our youngest detectives looking. And among the things we found, what we were hoping, we found parts for Amphion Piano. Amphion Piano, what they would do is they would actually usually take the pianos, and they would put their player piano pieces in an already existing one. So you could have a crane piano, and it would have Amphion parts to make it into a player piano. And Doman actually designed all the gears for it. And among the things we found was one of the gear mechanisms for right here. Here's another drawing of the inside of the player piano. And here's some of the parts that we found. This was mind-blowing, dropping, because as soon as we started finding gears inside the foundations of one of the buildings, we were pretty certain that was Amphion. And in a fun turn of fate, we actually went to where Amphion moved from the village of Elbridge, because eventually the water power from Skinny Atlas Creek had dropped. So the city of Syracuse by 1898 stole the water from Skinny Atlas Creek. The water levels dropped by about 80% or more. And so all of a sudden, all these mills that are powered by water had no power. And so Amphion then later went to Syracuse, and they actually built a factory in the Inner Harbor, and there they built pianos, and they actually have one in that building today, Spaghetti Warehouse. So if you've ever been to Spaghetti Warehouse, that is the Amphion Piano Company. We also found, just by chance, a musical stand there. We found these are from Doman Electric, and then my favorite piece is this one here. Well, it doesn't look much in the picture here. If you see it in person, because it will be on display till the end of the month in Elbridge, at the Elbridge Library. That little plate is actually, my friend was cleaning it, my colleague was cleaning it, and as he's cleaning it off, he goes, wait, there's feet. Wait, there's a piano. It's a printing plate from Amphion for an advertisement. Here's Royal. He found the music, one of the first finds we found. But the only things we found there, we found evidence of kids playing there. After the site stopped being an industrial district, many families use it as picnicking grounds, and so we have toys the kids found. These are parts, we believe, from Amphion pianos. We found lots of broken glass, and actually the glass was slightly melted, so we know that there was a fire in one of the buildings at one point. And one of the coolest things we found was this little pocket knife. So the kid who cleaned this off was so thrilled. What it turned out to be was, for him, was this clump of dirt. And as he's cleaning off the clump of dirt and helping to clean the find, he's like, I found a pocket knife. I'm like, that's exciting. He was so thrilled he found a pocket knife. Well, we let it dry out, and then I started looking like, oh wait, there's something, it says something on here. What is it? And it turns out that this pocket knife actually is from the World's Fair. From the 1939 World's Fair. It was like a bright new future or something like that. Then they didn't quite know in 1939 that World War II was about on the heels of it. So it was kind of an odd term for the World's Fair. And this is a cane from the same time frame, but you can see this insignia on this cane is the same little insignia that is on the pocket knife from the 1939 World's Fair. So my guess is that somebody's grandma went to the World's Fair, got it for him, and then he promptly lost it. And like, I'm not telling grandma I lost my pocket knife. That is not going to happen. But we found that. Then we did a quarry farm dig. So we went from digging on the side of an industry to back to our roots in farming. The Corey Farms was started back by a man named Calvin Corey. He and his family, and several families, moved together from Bridport, Vermont. What we do know in Bridport is several of them had children who died very young at Bridport. We don't know if there was a disease going through Bridport at the time, but they died very young. And so in the 1830s, 5 or 6 families, names together, moved in en masse to Jordan and settle. And one of the reasons for doing that is you move with your neighbor, your friends, and your family, because if you have 40 adults doing different tasks, you can be more assured that your little village is going to survive. If you have anything less than a critical mass of 40, that's how little townships dissolve, and all we have is crossroads by random names today. Usually, if you look at old maps, you're like, oh, there's a lot here. And then all of a sudden you look at it and there's not anymore. You lose that critical mass of 40 adults. So if you think about it, you have 5 to 6 families full of people and their children coming. Chances are, by that point, you've got at least 30 or more adults that are coming into the area to move. Chances of you surviving are greater. So here on the Corey farm, the original house here in the background, the original part of the house dates from the 1830s, and then this is an extension that was put on in the 1840s as the Corey family got bigger. They had lots of business dealings inside the village of Jordan. They weren't just farmers. Some of their relatives built buildings in Jordan, so they did very well for themselves when they moved here. So we were hoping to find some information about them in the dig. Like, can we find anything from Calvin Corey and his family? And that did not disappoint. So among the things that we found, first of all, this one. This is a doll made out of metal. It was made in the late 1800s. It was when the Coreys still lived on the farm and still owned the farm. And this one right here, the doll, we found little bits of her, and she was designed so that she could go on a cloth body and be a little bit more durable of a doll, and hopefully not break like a China doll. Of course, we found, because it was a working farm, we found horseshoes and horse tack and things like that, and things to horse bridles. We found lamps, different style lamps here. This is really intriguing because this find was a boot from the Civil War era, boot heel boot plate. And what was interesting about researching that is that serving during the Civil War, some troop battalions had their own specific boot heel plate. And you could tell by the imprint in the soil who they were. So some of them have different diamond-shaped cutouts, some of them have shamrock-shaped cutouts, depending on, not all battalions did this, but some of the battalions did that as a way of solidarity, but that was a boot plate. But we also found a coin from 1831 that would have been there dropped by Calvin Corey. That was really cool. It's in really good condition for it, so it was dropped very early on. It's not very much later than the time that Calvin Corey lived there. The other thing we found was this half penny from Canada. And I have actually a full penny from Canada from the same time period. Here we found actually the year before, and it's in pristine condition. And the reason you find pennies along the canal was it was 1 cent per mile for a passenger to travel. So people kept a collection of pennies with them to pay tolls whenever they needed to pay it. So if you think about it, it was 363 miles long on the original canal. It would have been $3.63 for tolls along the canal, not including your passage money. And then we found another coin Indian had sent from the 1880s. So this goes into whole different things, but one of the most intriguing finds was this right here. And I have a little bit of glass from it. Patent medicines were very popular in the 1800s, and it made some people filthy wealthy. So this one here is a patent medicine bottle that the teens brought up, and I was so excited when they got this one. This is Kilmer swamp root out of Binghamton. Kilmer made a killing and fortune off of the swamp root. His is more innocuous than many. I mean, it treated everything from kidney, liver, bladder remedy. It could treat anything for you in one bottle. It was fairly harmless. It was just mostly vegetable water, but he made a killing on this. A lot of them, though, they had more interesting ingredients, including putting narcotics sometimes in it, usually lots of alcohol in it, and that's what made you feel so much better was you drank a lot of alcohol in it. And so we weren't surprised that when pulling up bottles, we would pull up these patent medicine bottles because they were just ubiquitous. People were looking for cures for different things. But one of them intrigued me, and it was the bottle in the middle here, and this is a little bit of it, of another bottle of it. In fact, we found several of this bottle, and it's called Nervine. And in researching it, it gave us a little bit of history that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to find about somebody in the Corey family. We don't know who, unless we actually find some doctor's records in town. But Nervine was actually used as something that treated epilepsy. It was a treatment for epilepsy. Somebody in their family had a problem with epilepsy, and knowing that there are several bottles of it was a regular treatment that this person must have taken to help control their epilepsy. How well it worked, it must have worked well enough that they continue to use it because there are several bottles of it. But it gives us an insight that merely just seeing horseshoes on the farm, we wouldn't know that information about them. It's a personal look into their lives because we found something that can tell us a little bit more information about them. Some other things that we found, pardon the green color on it, just for whatever reason it decided to go greenish on this. We found lots of different types of pottery from all different things, including linoleum. Here we have, this is crockery, salt glazed crockery, and some of this is actually on display at the Jordan Village Hall right now from all over the area. Some of it was from Geddes pottery. Some of it was from Lyons, New York. There was pottery from Ohio, and there was even one from Minnesota that was traded along the canal. More pieces of pottery. We just found all sorts of pottery there. Medicine bottles. They're great for finding information about things. This button, the button weights in the back of it dates from about the 1820s, 1830s, the Tom back button. And the other thing is if you have here you go. If you, right here on the end of an oil lamp, it actually gives the date of the oil lamp when it was patented. Here's the Kilmer's Swamp Root. And again, this guy made a killing on it. He had a huge factory in downtown Binghamton. He had a huge mansion on Mansions Row from this. He did very well for himself. A better look at the boot plate here and all the different coins that we found along the way. Here's the 1831 coin. Here's the one from 1837, the half penny, and other ones from along there. This is from a garter. And garters aren't just women at the time. We tend to think of garters and we think women, but men's socks did not have elastic either. Everybody wore them to hold their socks up if you didn't tie your socks. And then we have the Tom back button and the heel plate. The other cool thing we found, which is totally unexpected, we found part of a boot. Usually leather goods just don't survive. And so we actually found both halves of this boot, and we have them in storage now. We don't know much about it, but it was we were just all shocked that we found leather. There's the doll coming out. Yeah, there's the little doll's head coming out of the ground. So then we decided to dig inside the site of the neighborhood. After the first ditch that we're celebrating 200 years this year is the 1825 Erie Canal Ditch, also known as Clinton's Ditch. What most people don't know, there's basically 3 ditches. There's the 1825 ditch, original. That was 363 miles long. Then there was the 1840s ditch that was 350 miles long. And then there's the modern ditch, and the modern ditch is 334 miles long. So there's 3 different ditches we're talking about. The original ditch would have gone to the backyards of all these houses that are there now, over on Mechanic Street in the village of Jordan. The 1825 ditch was filled in after the 1840s opened up, and people then built the new neighborhood. And so that's why we just did the neighborhood dig to see what would we find in the new neighborhood. Here's another picture from the late 1800s of the same houses here. There's a house on the corner that we're digging right here. We dug in the main part here. And then there are 2 houses that are really close side by side there. And there's just another view looking the opposite direction on the street. Here's a picture of the house today. The owner is restoring the house. And Landon was excited because he got the points for getting the tallest object found for the day. He was doing metal detecting and found a giant pipe. Luckily not attached to anything. We found that. The other interesting thing about this house is right here, in that room right there, The owner, who is restoring it right now, started peeling back the wallpaper. He peels it back and he's like, "Oh, it's painted." Pulls it back. "Wait, they're trees." Pulls it back further. "There's more." There was an entire painted mural room from the 1840s in the room that he's currently having professionally restored because he wants to keep it intact. But a hand-painted mural. So what did we find in the neighborhood dig? Well, we found lots and lots of cars. This is just a small smattering of the cars that we found. Some little boy went in for dinner one night and must have grown up. That's all I can think of. Because he left all of his cars behind, like a lot of them. And we found, this is just a few that are on display, and this is the rest, this is more of them, and we still have more of them that aren't out here now. So among the things that we found were the cars from some little boy playing, which these are from the most of these are from the 1970s. The other things that we found was we found a pocket watch, a lady's pocket watch. The lady's pocket watch, we actually had a watch dealer in town, his name was Tracy, and he lived in a big house over on South Main, and he was a watch dealer. We found old coins, which was kind of nice. One of the coolest ones we found was a 2 cent from 1864. And then this is a little medallion that was found. This means like happy blessing or something in Chinese, so it's not necessarily old. But the coolest find by far, this is a solid gold button, or as close to solid gold as you can get. It's not gold, just gold plated. It has, for being something that's about that big, it has incredible weight to it. I was shocked at that, but we found a gold button, and all I can think of is some guy dropped his button. And why do I say man dropped his button? Because at the time that it was found inside Clinton's ditch, when it was dropped, and at the time women's clothes rarely had buttons on them. Most of the time women were still pinning their clothes. Women's buttons would have come in the 1840s to the 1850s possibly. You would have possibly had them. And even then it was only decorative buttons. They weren't holding any weight on the garment. You would have had closures that would have closed up your garment. So they had the gold button would have probably been on a man's outfit, man's waistcoat. And some guy probably got home and went, "Oh, where did I lose that?" Among the other things we found was this. This is a locket, and we were actually able to figure out from records that this belonged to a woman named Anna, who lived in the town. It's the only person in the town that ever had those initials. And her name was Anna, and her husband was a horse racer. He raced horses professionally and eventually moved out to the Midwest so he could race horses. And we found a harmonica. And then we found this thing. This one was like, what is that? I had no idea what that was. And we actually found 2 of them. We found them in Clinton's ditch. And it turns out that those are weights for duck decoys. So somebody, before they filled in the canal, was trying to use the old canal to hunt ducks. And these are old lead ones, they're not new ones, but weighted ducks, decoys. We also found some things the kids played with, like a little soldier, and we found some, again, ubiquitous marbles, and another bell, sleigh bell. We like to say that Jordan was a very good town. We find sleigh bells everywhere, and lets us know that Santa's very happy with us. He's left us several sleigh bells over the years. Some other things that we found, bits of metal. We found bits of cans that we found. We try to save everything, so we have even little bits of stuff from like roofing stuff. And then there's a little tiny car here. And then this is actually found by our youngest metal detectors that day, 4-year-old. And it is a snow chain to a 1920s car. One piece of it. The little girl was so excited she found it. Again, here's a picture of the gold button. The Indian had sent. This is just a token that was made in the 1950s. Duck hunting, bits of life here. We got can jar. This goes to knob and tube wiring, chains, casters. There's our beautiful clamshell. And then we have the tavern dig. So the tavern dig, the metal detectors that we arrived, it was actually a rather chilly day. To the site of what was the Crossman Tavern. The Crossman Tavern was where Route 5 today goes south into, starts at south and west into Auburn. And then there's a cutoff that goes up towards Weedsport. If you had no business in Auburn and you wanted to make faster time, you would take that little side road and cut up to Weedsport and go across to Rochester that way to Buffalo. Diving down into, on the map, and if you ever look at it on a map, diving down into Auburn was a lot of extra miles. So if you didn't have any extra business doing that, you would have taken this and you could have stopped here. This house here, the original portion of the house is this portion right here of the house. This section was later added on about 20 years later, but this was the tavern. Taverns are what we tend to think of taverns today. Taverns were places where you could get a hot meal, you could get a bed to sleep in, you'd share rooms with perfect strangers usually, but you get a room to sleep in, get news of the day, and then you could go off on your next leg of your journey. So this is Crossman Tavern. This building dates from about 1802. Now, while we didn't find a lot of old stuff on this, and there's a reason, the current owners have moved a lot of dirt around in the past 20 years, all over the property. So the archaeology layer probably sits like under 3 feet of dirt before you actually get to it, unfortunately. But we didn't leave us not finding anything at all. So all the detectors that come in, we have them come in from all points of the area. So we have them coming in from Saratoga Springs to Rochester, coming into the Jordan area for these digs. And the nice thing about these digs, so this is how we run them. They come in, they donate their time, they dig up all the finds, and they donate them back to whatever historical place to tell the history of that place. They don't keep them. Normally metal detectors go out to parks, they metal detect, they find a cool coin, they find a necklace or whatever, they take that home with them. Everything stays together to tell the story of the place where we find the objects. So they all coming in for that particular purpose, and they know the drill to see what they can find on the area. And in exchange, I feed them lunch. And they have a great time doing it. This is inside Crossman Tavern. It's got this great cross beam trussing. It's all pegged, the house is pegged together. You can tell that from the roof up above. What they want to eventually do with this house is turn it into housing for veterans. The lady who owns it, she's got about $8,000 left on the loan that needs to be cleared first, and then it'll be transferred over to AmeriVets. But what was really neat is we actually found stuff that had to do with military, and we could not have made this up. We found military stuff. So the first fun find was a fork from the U.S. Navy. This is officer-grade cutlery made by Reed & Barton silversmiths. And it's heavy silver. This is not your lightweight silver-plated stuff your grandma would bring out at Thanksgiving time, and it was disgusting tasting. My grandmother did that all the time. Ugh. Silver-plated. This is the real stuff made by Reed & Barton. And this here helped date some of the stuff. So this is officer grade from the about 1920s to the 1940s. Later found out that the family who lived there before her father was in the U.S. Navy. Not only was her father in the U.S. Navy, her father participated in D-Day. He was among the people who came in first to set up everything so that the men could go ashore on D-Day. So there we found the fork from the Navy to tie that in. We found horse tack, we found bits of marbles and other things that kids played with. Let's go back here. Oh, actually, I know I have that in there. We didn't really find any old coins, but lots of things. This is a working farm also, so we found lots of things that were farm implements here. And things. So here we go. There's the fork here that was found. Lou was so excited when he found that. It was like first a really good silver here. Larry loves looking for toys and found all the stuff here working with the kids. We did find a toy pistol from one of the families from playing. One of the little boys dropped it. We found knives in the kitchen where the kids were playing out in the yard. But this by far was the most exciting thing. Derek B, this is the only time he has been able to make it to any of the digs. He's a farmer, and he's like, I can't make it unless you have one of the ones that are after harvest time, because as soon as spring hits, I'm in the fields all the time. And this is what it would look like if it was perfect. But that's what, ours is missing one little tiny piece, but we found an example of this. And it is a World War I British artillery hat insignia. And we thought, how did this land here? None of the people that lived at the property, to my knowledge, served in World War I. Where did it come from? And our best guess is that the man that lived here that was from the US Navy, he was stationed in England at the time, and I think it's something he picked up to take home with himself. And probably, well, it would have to be his daughter, he only had one child. Took it outside one day and accidentally lost it, and did not want to tell Dad it was lost. But we found that in the thing. But that was just so cool to find. We found everything. We also even found a little World War I military man, lead man. So why do metal detecting? Because metal detectors are going to detect anyways. They're going to go out in fields, they're going to detect in parks, they're just going to do it. It's a fun hobby to do. It's recovering bits of history. One of the things we recovered this past summer, we found a button from the 1840s Harrison campaign, which would have rotted into the ground had it not been pulled out of the ground. It saves history. These people are going to detect anyways. Why not bring them into the fold of history and say, look, you can do your hobby. We could use your help. It's a great way to survey. It's a great way to find out what's there. You get together with people who are equally excited about these things. Now, of course, there are caveats to this. And some of the caveats to this that I like to make as a disclaimer is, no, we do not do Native American sites. The Haudenosaunee are not a people group just to be ran over like they were a curiosity. The Haudenosaunee, this is their land. We don't dig places where we know there are going to be graves. We don't dig up people's grannies. We don't dig up things that could be sacred sites. We stay clear of those. There are plenty of sites around Central New York where we can dig that don't require us to break that thing. We are not going to go onto sacred sites of the Haudenosaunee. We are also not going to go on sacred sites that are very delicate in their history. So we're not going to go onto battlefields unless we have permission. We're not going to go into cemeteries because nobody's digging up Granny. We're not going to do things like that. That's kind of like one of those absolute givens. We're not going to do any of that. But what we are going to do is we're going to take people who like history anyways and help make them a part of the solution of saving history. And I would like historians from across the state to eventually see that metal detectorists are not out to ruin history. They're out here to save this. I pay them in pizza. They come out for the day. And all these finds get saved together to tell the history of our area. And I also use these bits of history to talk with kids and my kids programs I do. I do programs with kids from everywhere from preschool all the way through adults to show them bits of history about the past, because these are great things. They can hold this. I don't care whether they hold this because it's already broken. This is not a $1,000 Ming vase. But if it gets them thinking about history and their past, that somebody actually made this, and maybe look at it, oh wait, there are fingerprints in the back, and that was made by fingerprints. Maybe I want to try pottery myself and learn a skill. Awesome. That's exactly what I want to do with kids. I want to spark their curiosity about history of the past, and adults as well. History is a window on our past and a door to our future, and archaeology is the key, though, to unlock both. So thank you for being here. I'll take some questions in a second. Real quick, though, I do have canal side cooking coming up in the Village of Jordan this Saturday. If you're interested, we're going to be talking about farming, and we're making a historic snack. You don't have to stay for 2 hours. It's just to come sample a historic treat from the past. I also have a talk coming up on September 2nd at the Beecham Historical Club, talking about 35 miles on the Erie Canal, and what we can learn about, what you can see about the canal today if you walk the entire length of the canal through Onondaga County. And then we also have a canal basics work, how the canal worked in Jordan, looking at our canal infrastructure. All right, thank you. And do anybody have any questions? Yes.
How far back did they start metal detecting? Do you have any idea, like how they started using that technique?
I'm not sure. I do know people who have done it since the 70s, and I imagine since the 60s, but I think that a lot of that was technology that really came available at post-World War II for the average person to go to Radio Shack. I remember as a child seeing the detector at Radio Shack and so wanting to buy it because I was certain I would find my pirate's treasure buried there. Yeah, and other things that we do is we also do magnet fishing with the kids as well, which you take a gigantic magnet, toss in the water, and see what it pulls up, and you can get amazing stuff out of that as well. We actually found a carriage stepping plate that way in Skinny Atlas Creek by just tossing a magnet in and seeing what it was that came up out of there. Any other questions? Yes?
So, you obviously have a lot of insight into different artifacts, whether they're buttons or articles of clothing or coins or whatever. Did you acquire that from the archaeology, or do the metal detectorists help you identify what these things are? How long does it take you to find an artifact and figure out what it was?
So some of it is something that I do know. There are a few of them I read. Now the Google search thing is kind of nice, but they can also be wrong. They were telling me this one piece of metal that I pulled up was ancient Greek artifact, and I know the Greeks weren't here, so I knew that wasn't correct. But it turned out it was actually a candle snuffer. So that was kind of cool. Some of the guys know the history. Like we actually had in our dig this past weekend in Memphis, we pulled up two large cents that were unreadable. The date was unreadable on it. But the one guy that does the detecting, Jim McLaughlin, he was looking at them, and he could date one between 1810 and about 1820 because of the way it was designed, and the other one he could date from about 1820 to 1830 from the way it was designed. Couldn't get the exact dating on it. A lot of it is just from stuff that I have read and absorbed over the years, so the usage of them is just, I read a lot.
What's the most interesting thing you've ever found? Or one of your diggers?
The most interesting thing. Oh, okay. Most interesting thing. This is not it, but it's close to it, like it, so you can see it. It's over here. Is it over here? I saw it in the button. Oh, yeah, I thought I put it out. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is not it, because it's actually off display right now, but I forgot to grab it. I tell the guys, say every bit of dirt possible. And whatever you find in the dirt. And if you think it's trash, the metal that you find, just toss it in the bin, recycling bin, I'll look through it, and if it's scrap, the scrap goes to the Boy Scouts, and we keep the history. Everybody wins, and the environment gets cleaner out of the deal. So we found I get to the bottom, and I find this, at first it was a rose tag, and I cleaned it off, and I realized it was a luggage tag. And the luggage tag had a name on it. Now, I had already found this, bracelet, which I don't see handy right this second. We found a bracelet, and the bracelet had a name on it. So I was excited to actually look for the name that went with this luggage tag. And then I started reading. I learned that the individual who owned it murdered his mother-in-law. He was really mad because he must have had a piece to work with, to live with. And so his wife had moved back home with her parents, with the children. And one evening he came over to the house and he wanted to see the kids. Well, according to the newspaper article, the mother-in-law said, "No, you can't see the kids, my daughter's sleeping." He got angry, he went to his car, he got a shotgun and shot her point blank. Then bludgeoned her with the shotgun for good measure. Well, in the meantime, in the melee, the wife wakes up, he bludgeons her till she's unconscious in the backyard. Now, the newspapers, in case you're wondering, he went up and he talked to his children for a good half an hour. He's a very good father. Newspaper was very clear to make sure you knew that he saw his children. So he talks to his children for a half an hour, and then he goes down to look for his father-in-law, who was then working at the power plant for the Rochester, Syracuse, and Eastern Railroad. In the meantime, the neighbors have now realized what has happened in the backyard, and they see his wife in the backyard bludgeoned. They see the grandmother dead, and then they call out, the police have been notified, they said Dr. Whiteley from town came in and was trying to treat her, the wife for her injuries. And it says that by the time he got to the powerhouse, the father-in-law wasn't there. He then cried and confessed that he had shot his mother-in-law, and they send for the police and take him away. The entire time, the sad part about it is the newspaper articles were desperately trying to portray him as such a loving father. And so, let's say he just wanted to see his kids. That's the only reason he murdered his mother-in-law. He just wanted to see his kids. And it was like, just kind of mind-boggling. Eventually he pled guilty, and he spent the rest of his life and died in Auburn Penitentiary. However, because he just loved his kids, the judge made a provision that he could go back and say goodbye to his children one last time. And the newspaper is clear to also point out that when he did, nobody answered the door. Can you believe it? I know everybody's shocked here in this room, but nobody came to the door because nobody wanted to speak to him. So the family, that so much history could be bound up into one little piece of metal that was it told a piece of history that everybody had forgotten about. Recently found out that the family, the 3 children, ended up getting split up among relatives. 1 actually drowned in the Seneca River, and 2 lived to adulthood. And one of the distant relatives came across the story, and what he wanted to know more. And then he wondered if any of these 2 other children were alive. 1 had passed away, but one of them was still alive. And he actually made contact for almost the first time in almost 100 years. The 2 sides of the family have made contact with each other. And were able to share photographs and family history with each other that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So there is a happy ending to the tale of that. But I think that's probably the most interesting thing. And the other interesting thing would be the 1837 coin, because that was minted in a time when there was a war up in Canada, and all the metal that was going to coins was ended going to shotguns and being made for guns for war. So they authorized the banks to make these coins, and you find these bank tokens very readily around our area because we're being so close to Canada. So those are probably the 2, I think, most interesting pieces that we found so far. And the locket. The locket was cool too. Any other questions?
So what death do you generally, I know there's a lot of different deaths, but what's kind of the typical death that you get to?
Some of them are right, like coins tend to be just under the surface, so usually only no more than 2 or 3 inches down. This piece here, now everybody's seen a horseshoe before. This is a mule shoe, but few people know what this is. This is one of the first finds we had. Did you find this, Glenn? Thea? No, it was one of our first digs. I'd have to look it up. But first time we went out really seriously metal detecting, and I dug down deep and deeper, and then I'm like, what is this? I finally pull it out. I'm like, I did not dig down this far just to get like a golf club. Please let it not be a mini golf club. And then one of the guys that was at the dig with us, he's like, you just found? I'm like, what is it? He's like, it's an oxen shoe. So there's should be one on that side and one on that side. So an oxen would have 8 of these. And an oxen accidentally lost one of his shoes. And the reason I keep this is because of being a canal town, mules pulled the barges. Sometimes horses did. Mules had better temperaments. But in Pennsylvania, oxen were often used to pull the canal boats. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you ever dug around here?
No, I haven't. But I'm always open. If somebody has an old property, I can always get together with somebody and have them do this. Again, the people that I do these digs with, I vet them first to make sure that they're not going to rob you blind and like they're not out to scope your house and take your stuff. They're a really great group of people to work with. But we have history. So if you know of a property that might be interested in, something I'm willing to work with and help set up, because it's easy to set up. And then all the finds that you get for the day go to whoever the local history place is, so that they can then clean it up, put it on display. But it really does help get local interest in local history from the people around it, because the kids, they don't know their history. And I've also learned that the adults don't know it much better either. They don't understand the vast depth of stuff. But when you can pull it out of the ground, you can see it for yourself, and you can hold it, it becomes more real to you and you want to learn more about it. It's one of the reasons I do, especially with kids. Any other questions? Somebody else had one over here, I thought. Yes?
Was it called Clinton's ditch that went
I'm sorry.
what was the name of the ditch that went through Mechanic Street?
I have a...
Also, it's called Clinton's Ditch in Lyle.
Okay, so it's called Clinton's Ditch. Okay, so the reason it's called Clinton's Ditch. So right after the revolution, they knew that you could get up the Mohawk, do a little bit of a bateau carry over to the Oneida, and you could kind of loosely navigate the waterways here. But you had to do like pick up a gigantic boat and move it over waterways and connect carries and stuff. It was not very good. They did have something called the inland navigation, which was like a proto-canal that was going on along the Mohawk, trying to help boats get up the Mohawk River inland, heading west. But the companies didn't run very well, and eventually New York State realized they needed something better. In there, Baldwin built the Baldwin Canal in Baldwinsville, trying to help with navigation of the Seneca River. But they realized they needed something better than that. The plans were made, and one of the reasons that Jordan was founded was the people who lived there hedged their bets because of the topography of the land. The canal was going to come through there. And when they started digging, basically it said things like, nothing will fill this ditch except the tears of our children. People thought that would never work. Nobody would ever use this canal. It was a folly to spend all this money on it. Why would we go and do this? Why would we be sending our children into eternal debt over this? Why are you doing it? So as a divisive term, they called it often Clinton's Ditch. Clinton was Governor Clinton at the time, and he was the one proponent trying to get this built. And Clinton knew that this would, in order for New York to remain competitive, it needed the canal. It needed a way to reach the Erie. And so going through from Albany to Buffalo on the canal, they started digging. But they didn't start at Albany and dig one way across. They started the easiest section in Rome first, because it was called the Rome Level. It was flat and an easy dig. Easy to go. Rome Level was started in 1817 and finished by 1819. Then Syracuse wasn't hard. It was in a low level too. On the eastern end, western end of it, there was the Jordan Summit. And that was, again, a very easy, relatively easy area to dig. So you had a couple work crews on this side, and you had a couple work crews working on this side of Onondaga County, and meeting in the middle in Syracuse. So by 1820, July 4th, 1820, you could go from Montezuma, Port Byron, Montezuma area, all the way to Rome on the Erie Canal. It was like a test run of it on Clinton's Ditch, that 1825 canal. And they still call it that because nobody thought anybody would use it. Well, they had a 5-year test run before it officially opened in 1825. They were still trying to figure out the Crescent Aqueduct over over the Mohawk, and they were still trying to figure out blasting through rock in Lockport. So between the two of those, they had this test run, and they realized not only did people use it, they built it too small. They knew very quickly in that 5-year period that the middle section was in use, that they built it too small to begin with. So as soon as they fed it and celebrated all of the opening of the new canal in October and early November of 1825, they went back to the drawing board and started building the drawings for the 1840s ditch, which was, the original canal was 4 feet deep and 40 feet wide. The newer canal would be 7 feet deep and 70 feet wide. The current barge canal is supposed to be 120 feet wide and 12 feet deep. However, most boats today do not go west of the Oswego River because of the really big boats. Some places it barely drafts 6 to 8 feet. So they can't actually get their boat, and then plus bridges, they can't get the boats underneath it. So they have to go up to Syracuse and then never up here to the Oswego to Lake Ontario. When they're taking the canal. But they called it Clinton's Ditch. It was meant to be a mockery of Governor Clinton. Like, why would Clinton build this? He's going to ruin us all. And then by the time it opened, everybody knew this was going to be a game changer and moneymaker. And people are about building all their businesses along it and making the fortunes along the canal. Yes, sir.
You could use the half penny called it, to travel and traverse that ditch?
Yep. Yeah. So you could actually use it was a penny toll per mile. That didn't include like what your canal boat operator, PAC-B boat operator would charge you to travel. That would be on top of that. So every person's fare would be 1 penny per mile, and it would be taken. And the canal boat captain had to keep records of everything to make sure that they were charging appropriate things. So you'd be able to use it. Yeah.
Yes, it was more of a coin, I was curious.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. Half penny, I was not familiar with.
Well, yeah, half pennies fell out of favor by the mid-1800s because coins had become so valuable. I mean, the half penny is about 3/4 the size of this. It's a lot of metal, and it costs more money than a half penny to make. And so it was a type of thing that phased out. It's one of the reasons they stopped making large cents, because the large cents, which were maybe 3/4 of the size as well, large cents were about the size of one of those like Sacagawea dollars. The large cents they stopped making because the copper was worth more than the penny itself, and that's the same thing we have today. It's worth more. But yeah, you could have 2 half pennies, and because things seemed to cost less, currency was just divided differently, and they eventually became irrelevant currency because nobody was doing anything in the half cents anymore. So, any other questions? Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. And if you want to come up and look at any of this, feel free to come up and look at any of this. I can answer any questions about it. I have stuff from flint knapping stuff, and I have all the different finds from the different digs we found. So I encourage you to come up and look, and thank you so much for having me.